Okay, so I'm Lindsay from the Longmeadow Adult Center. Thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm excited to welcome Rich Rediker. Rich and I started talking in July about coming to the new Adult Center. And after building and COVID setbacks, I'm happy we're finally here today, partially, right? Rich is a former journalist and high school chemistry teacher who founded Rediker software in 1979, a system now used by thousands of schools in all 50 states and more than 115 countries. He's a world traveler, Asian food and Boston sports fanatic, and proud grandpa. And today's program is brought to you by Longmeadow Adult Community Center Fund, whose mission includes bringing the Adult Center some new and exciting programming, such as this one. And Longmeadow Adult Community Center Fund has also donated the luggage piece behind me. It's a Toomey luggage. And so one lucky winner today will win that. So I'll use a random number generator and I'll put that in the chat. I'll put the results there, okay? So as I said, I'm recording today's program in case anyone misses it. And please consider keeping your video on. It's a lot more fun for Rich to speak to people rather than black screens. It will help if you keep yourself muted until the time for questions. And thank you again to Rich for sharing his time and expertise with us today. And I will turn it over to you now, Rich.
I'd like to thank everybody for having me here. You know, somebody mentions travel and I can talk about it for days and days and days, you know, about whatever it is. And it got me thinking when I was doing a PowerPoint, you know, it's been, time flies, as we all know, and I know we're all sitting here with COVID, you know, hunkering down, not traveling too much. And I thought about what are the best trips I've done the last 50 years. I've done so many, and it really brought back a lot of memories putting this thing together for you. And I had some categories, and I hope to pick not things you'll see in normal tours, not things that you know about. I'm not going to show the famous tourist sites that everybody sees all the time. But as far as travel goes, the best thing is just immersing yourself in the culture of a different country, seeing things that are so different than where you live at home, the memories, the people that you meet along the way. That's what's important and unique. And I've done some pretty good trips that are pretty unique, that are very inexpensive. You know, we're not talking like luxury travel here, although we stay in nice places because we go to places where the prices aren't high. And it's just been so many adventures and places that you wouldn't think. A lot of things that they're so unexpected. So I'd like to start by, since there's not all that many people right now, just a quick thing, just so we can all kind of make it like I was in person. I would have loved to have been in person there, but COVID just doesn't seem to be playing nice. And I am planning to go on a trip next week again, and I have to test negative on Tuesday, so we don't have a chance passing the stuff around, and so many people I know right now have it. So glad to see everybody here in a nice, safe manner. Let me just quickly go around, and since there's not all that many, I was going to say do it by chat, but just think about this for a second. We don't want to take up all this time. What's the best place you've been, and what's next on your bucket list when you get a chance to travel? And that's all you have to say, your name, and I'll just call you out to see how you're, got a name on here, and just think about it for a second. The best place you've ever been and what's next on your bucket list, because I consider everybody's here. You must all love travel because you're all here with me today. So Ken. And by the way, there's a fast way to unmute yourself. Holding down your space bar unmutes it, and then when you let go, you're muted again. So you don't have to click on the other.
That's right. Okay. Croatia and Montenegro. We found really fascinating, and on the bucket list, Greece, I think, is probably high up there. Greece.
Okay. Helene Murphy?
Maybe Turkey. Okay.
All right.
Galapagos.
Okay.
We were there,
Yeah.
and we want to go to Australia if we can.
Yeah, Australia's tough. It's just starting to open up again. So hopefully we'll all be able to get there again some point in time. Kathy's I. You have to unmute yourself.
For me, also Croatia. I was hiking in Croatia and it was just gorgeous. And my next hike I'm already planned is Italy, going back to Italy, another favorite place of mine.
Fantastic. We've been a little bit in Croatia, but not fully to really see it properly. But Linda and John.
Cape Town, South Africa. We've lived there. And place we'd like to go. We're saying Iceland.
Wow. In the summertime, I hope. Anyway, Carlene.
Hi, good afternoon. I love Ireland and it's probably my favorite place, but I also would like to go to Australia.
All right. And Gail, who's been on a lot of these trips with me. Okay, Gail, you're on the spot now. Unmute.
Well, Rich's brother has a wonderful quote about him. He says, Rich is a comet and we just hang on to his tail. So I would have to say all of my adventures with him have been wonderful. I am hoping to go to like Sicily and Sardinia and those areas. We haven't approached that. And I kind of wanted to go to Ireland, but it always seems like it's raining there. But everybody says they love it.
Thank you. Lucy.
Favorite trip was to Israel. Spent a month there about 15 years ago. And I am also in the Ireland corner. It has been on my bucket list forever.
Okay. Marcia. Unmute. Unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, yep.
So we're not huge travelers, but we took about 6 years ago, we went to England and did a narrowboat trip on the canals with another couple. So, you know, you ride your own boat. It's like 6 feet wide. You could actually touch the two sides if you put your arms out. That was a fabulous, fabulous trip. You just chugged down the canal and stopped and had lunch at a tavern and met people, and it was great. Can you still
bucket list? Bucket list?
Bucket list, you know, since COVID, we haven't really even talked about going anywhere. So I'm interested in everybody else's bucket lists.
Okay. Pat, thank you. Pat.
Prague was my favorite. I've been wanting to go to Paris 2 years for my birthday. Lots of luck. And with COVID, I'm looking forward to this year hitting Philadelphia because I love the art. I love the history. And I think it's close and should be safe. A little bit of luck.
Good luck. Buzz. I see Buzz McGraw.
Oh, hi, I'm really Betsy. I don't know why my daughter's name is on there. My husband, but I am planning this fall a high school to the Great Lakes from Chicago to Montreal. Fingers crossed.
And Lorraine.
Yes, 2 favorite trips, France, because I went with about 15 high school students and seeing France through their eyes as well as my own was quite exciting. Ireland, and it rained only when we were in the fields and the highlands watching all the little critters. So that was kind of nice. My bucket list, I should say it should have already happened because 3 times I had my trip to Greece scheduled, 3 times because of COVID, we had to postpone it and now it's been canceled. So I'm still waiting for Greece.
All right, we hope you get there. Barbara. Unmute.
Favorite was Budapest and looking forward to returning to see family in Israel.
All right. And Gail Manning. Unmute, please. I know she's there. Marilyn.
Oh, hi. My favorite place was southern Italy and Sicily. And now because of my age, I really just have to watch everyone else's travels. I won't be going that far anymore.
You know, we're glad we can share some stuff with you. And that's why you got to do it while you can. It's what I say every day. You know, every time you postpone, who knows how long you can travel for. So I try to enjoy every day as it comes and make the most of it. And James Gregory and Julie Smith. James, are you there?
It's Patricia, his wife.
Okay.
Hi there. I guess our favorite trip as a couple was going to a wedding in the Channel Islands. My husband's sister and her family live in London. And when their son married, he married a girl from Guernsey. And so we had a wonderful trip visiting not only Guernsey, but some of the other islands out there, including the feudal island of Sark. That was probably the most, it was magical. It was like the most unique thing I could ever imagine. But we've been to Italy with my roots and we're saving so that we can go to Ireland for his roots.
All right, here, a lot of Ireland there. Julie.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, my favorite place is London and Paris. I went over there twice. One is I went with my husband before I retire. Another time is I went there with the whole family, children, my children, and then my grandchildren. And that was fun.
Hey, Lindsay, anybody there? And what, and you, Lindsay, have to participate too. Your favorite
Yes.
place?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Lindsay. I got to be a nanny in Switzerland one summer, and so that was amazing. And on my bucket list is taking my kids anywhere. They're little, so we haven't done much. We have Lorraine Thomas here. Lorraine, do you have a favorite travel spot?
We've done many trips, about 17 trips, so I can't choose anyone that's
Wow.
special, but I really would like to go to Ireland. That's on my bucket list.
Okay, the lighting's a little bad. All right, and then we have Clark Volk over here. Clark, do you have a favorite place you went? Have you been anywhere you liked?
Favorite place I went was Australia.
Oh, wow. And do you have anywhere you're hoping to go?
Not right now.
Not right now? All right. And this is Wendy Steer. Do you have a favorite place, Wendy?
Well, we really enjoyed Spain and Portugal. Our last trip to Alaska was canceled because of COVID, and we have a tentative trip to Scandinavia, and
goodness.
what'll be with COVID, who knows?
Wow. And this is Richard. Richard, do you have a favorite place?
Yes, my favorite was Spain, and like Wendy said, we're planning to go to Scandinavia.
Awesome. That's great. How about you, Mr. Canova? Any fun
I
places?
guess my favorite place was Munich and Nuremberg in Germany.
Awesome. Any places you hope to go?
I have nothing planned
Not
for
yet.
the immediate future.
All right, wonderful. So those are our in-person friends here. Thank you.
Great to have everybody here. And most of the places that you guys mentioned are not on my charts. So I'm hoping to give you some unusual places, some kind of different places. And I haven't been to Ireland actually, and I'd certainly love to go any place. You name it, I'll go there. But I hope to talk about some of the unusual places in the world, things that people might not think are that accessible, but end up being pretty cool when you get there and pretty easy to do. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. And which screen? Okay. Are you guys seeing the world now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Seeing two worlds.
Yeah.
So your presenter view is on top of the other view.
Okay, so I'm sharing the wrong screen then. Okay, stop
Okay.
share. I'm going to share the screen again. Thank you. I will share screen one. Okay. And so now, if I go over here, you're seeing the view of the world, you're seeing not the presenter view, correct?
I'm seeing two screens.
We're seeing two screens.
Two screens.
Two screens. Let me go back to here again. Apologize. Back
He's
to
got
here.
a bunch of screens out at his house.
Right, so the question is, screen 2 is the one I want to share. I'm sure that's it. Okay, now I'm going to just start this because you haven't seen it. We'll see what happens here. Okay.
Yep, that's better.
There it is.
Okay. And so now you should see just the best 50 years of travel is what it says. So I got you guys over here. And if anybody, if you need to say anything, you can do it in the chat and we'll try to go through this and then we'll have questions. You know, if you can either raise your hand or Lindsay get attention if there's something that's really crucial about one of the places we're talking to. And I'll go. Okay, so to start with, by the way, I was a high school chemistry. I was a high school chemistry teacher at Longmeadow High School, 78 to 85, and had Marcia Snyder's son, Chip, way back when as a high school chemistry student. So I go back and loved Longmeadow High School and love my time there. But I've always been interested in travel. And with the first one, how did I get interested in travel? I actually, sometime back in the day, I read The Drifters by James Michener. Raise your hand if you'd ever read The Drifters. Michener was one of my favorite authors who wrote about great places all over the world. I think I've read all his books, and probably right now nobody knows, at least the younger generation, nobody's ever heard of James Michener before. This is actually the book right here. I still have it. that I read probably 50 years ago. And the drifters described a trip all around Europe, Spain, and I actually stuck my thumb out in 1973. I just flew over there on the cheap, had a backpack on, stuck my thumb out and hitchhiked down to Morocco. And I found this old snapshot from Marrakech, entering the city of Marrakech, and I had a little bit more hair then, and that's 1973. Unbelievable, it's about 50 years ago. And I basically went wherever it picked me up. I stuck my thumb out, and if somebody was going to this place, I'd go there. And then sleep, I could find sheep in the woods, on a beach, in youth hostels, whatever it was, and it was quite an adventure. So then, back then, the next big trip was after I got out of school, was our honeymoon. And we actually, I'd thought about this a long time. I wanted to make a big circle in Europe. And we started in Paris. And I wanted to, how do you make a big circle in Paris? We went up to Scandinavia, went up to, Norway and Sweden and Finland. But how do you get back? You got to drive through the Soviet Union. And this is 1976, the height of the Cold War. Brezhnev is the premier. They just had the, all kinds of things. This was the height of the Cold War there, that we weren't getting along with them. They weren't getting along with us. And I said, I want to go to the Soviet Union, and I want to do it by camping. I don't want to take one of those tours where you go with a group and you're taken from place to place. And I found this travel agent that was authorized for the Soviet Union in Chicago, where I was at the time. And she said, I still remember, she said, I help you plan this trip. Maybe someday you'll buy a round the world cruise for me. Well, I don't know what's happened there because I've never gotten around the world cruise, but she helped me get a visa. It took about 10 months, a camping visa to the Soviet Union. This is 1976. And I wrote an article about it that was in the Chicago Tribune, another one in the Boston Globe at the time. So this is what it was like going through the Soviet Union in 1976. And it was an incredible experience I'll never forget. And we made that big circle. We left the Soviet Union through the south. We went through Kiev, and you couldn't get chicken Kiev in Kiev, by the way. And then back into Austria, and back. And the interesting thing, as part of the article about, is crossing the border. The only place east met west was Finland. And when you cross the border, I remember they did take for a road tax, American Express, Visa, or MasterCard. But I could just spend the whole day talking about the Soviet Union in 1976. We'd never get any place. This is just a couple old snapshots. Back in the olden days, we didn't have digital cameras, but here we are in the car I rented in Paris. This is some town in the Soviet Union somewhere, and then here we are with Gail in the Red Square. At the time, you had to walk on these white stripes. If you got off the white stripes, somebody would come and yell at you to get back on the white stripes. Not so much anymore. And I was wearing shorts, which you didn't do. It was like a hot day in Moscow. And one of the soldiers, I remember, hit my legs with one of his little batons saying, no shorts and no feet, don't get off the white stripe. So that was a little experience there, but it was a great, great, great experience. Again, just that one trip could take up the whole time. Now, I wasn't going to put this part in, but now we're all sitting there talking about how you can't travel due to COVID right now. We just got back from Chile just a couple of weeks ago. We went to Chile the first 2 weeks of December. And if you want to escape COVID right now, Chile is your answer. It was quite remarkable. So I just threw these 3 slides in coming up. People don't think of it, but if I had to go someplace now, I'd go to Chile rather than Florida any day. It could be less money. It's midsummer there. The sun stays up till 9:30. And how they handle COVID is quite remarkable. They have virtually no COVID right now. It's gone up a little bit, but it's still about a 20th of what we have here. And I just thought that some of these pictures are pretty unique. First, about a month before I went, I had to get this mobility pass. You couldn't even get on the plane. That's in the upper right corner here. You had to upload your CDC card. They had to verify it. It's got the dates of all my shots, my booster shot, and you couldn't get on a plane to get there. You had to have a PCR test when you took to get on the plane. You had to be fully vaccinated. You had to have this. You couldn't, everybody on the plane was that way. I believe in doing nonstops, especially now with COVID. And so that means we went to JFK. They have a nonstop to Santiago, 9.5 hours. It's a really easy flight. And everybody on the plane was fully vaccinated and had to pass a PCR test. You land at the airport in Santiago, Chile, and within 45 minutes, you're in a little room with a nurse who gives you a PCR test there, and you have to be quarantined until you get a negative test back, which was only a couple hours, and then you're free to go. We went to a quarantine hotel. I'll talk about that in a second, and then you're free to go in the country. But everybody there, they have a far left, they have a far right, but everybody kind of agrees that dying isn't so good. And so they all follow COVID protocols. And as you can see, I thought this was a pretty cool picture. That's their local Hells Angel biker group, and they all wear masks outdoors. So it's quite remarkable. And then this right here is we stopped at a highway rest area, and it would be like stopping in an area on the Mass Turnpike. It was about midnight, and only 3 people at a time could go into the bathroom. There's a guard there. You have to have a mask on, which everybody wears anyway. And so they were only allowing 3 people in at a time, even though there's almost no COVID. And then here is another tour. Again, every single person inside and out wears masks all the time. Nobody has to say anything about it. Going down to here. This is where our quarantine hotel was. It was the Mandarin Oriental in Santiago, 85 degrees. We didn't see a cloud for 2 weeks. This is the dry season there. There's no rain whatsoever. And it was under $200 a night, to stay in these beautiful places. Most of the hotels were under $100 a night that we stayed at, so it's not expensive. And when we got there, the room wasn't available that we're supposed to quarantine in. We actually sat by the pool while we waited to go for our room. Within a half an hour, we got the email from the government that we were negative and that we were free to travel. So this was where we spent our quarantine, right here, 85 degrees, sitting by the pool, and then we were free to go wherever we wanted to go. The next day, we actually left on our trip. Over here, this is a bench. Even all the park benches outside, they had check, X, check. Chile is really serious. I saw a map the other day saying which country is the most protected. Over 90% of the people are vaccinated and boosted in Chile. It's quite remarkable how they've handled it. Just everybody together, and COVID is really, really low. But what's also interesting is we saw no other foreign tourists except us, basically. Only other Chileans are traveling. So it's a great time to go. Nothing's crowded. This restaurant we went to, it's a solar restaurant in the middle of nowhere. And everything's cooked using solar ovens in the sun. But the woman was so happy to see us. We were the first non-Chileans, that's not just Americans, non-Chileans in 2 years to visit her restaurant. And she said she used to have a visitor guest pad registration. She doesn't even know where it is, because all it is just Chileans coming in there now. And so she was so happy to see a foreigner actually back in Chile, which is pretty interesting. Why did I put in this thing of Fruit Loops, Frosted Flakes? Well, 2 things. Chile is interesting is that, I don't think there's any other country that does this. Anything with high sugar, high calories, high fat, high whatever, has to have these little black stars in the corner. So some foods can have 5 of them. Those are the really bad foods. But even if you have 1 of them, you're not supposed to eat it. But anything that gets one of those black things, and certainly Frosted Flakes is high in sugar and high in calories, you can't have any mascots. So Tony the Tiger is banned in Chile. And that was interesting because when we had a box of Frosted Flakes, and I hate sugar cereal nowadays, in Russia, and when our car was searched, going into Russia, they actually had a KGB guy or somebody translating to them, and they were reading our box of Frosted Flakes about Tony the Tiger in the back. But, and that was also the time they did take off our door panels to see if we were smuggling out a manuscript, because that's when Solzhenitsyn and those guys were smuggling out their manuscripts from the Soviet Union at the time. But I think the only country you won't see Tony the Tiger on Frosted Flakes is Chile. That was just interesting. And this is the kind of interesting things to see. Why did we go to Chile? We had a AFS student live with us for a year in high school, and he's now got 2 kids, married. And every few years I go to Chile or he comes up here. So it's been great to keep in touch. And so we spent the time together. We had planned this a year ago, and they just lifted the 2-week quarantine in November. So we weren't even sure we were going to go, because you don't want to go and spend 2 weeks in a hotel mandatory. So they just lifted it for vaccinated people, put in some strict controls, etc. And of course, in Chile right now, and this is the last one for Chile, we went some hot springs, and I'm with the son and daughter of my former AFS student, and the peaches and nectarines are ripe. The strawberries are incredibly juicy because it's midsummer there. And then here's Gail sitting by the water at a restaurant where you could eat outdoors. So if somebody said, where do I want to go right now, that I would feel way safer than going to the Big Y in Longmeadow, would be go down to JFK, hop on a plane to Chile. You'll be in Santiago and you can enjoy yourself. The north is the desert, which, the first time I've been to the north, I thought it was nice, but I think the US Southwest desert is prettier per se. For that, but I love Chile. I love the South better than the North. In fact, right here I have for us Nico, who, since I'm talking about Chile right now, Nico, say hi. He is who we went to see in Chile, my former AFS student. Nico, say hi. He's in Santiago right now.
Hello, Rich. Hello, everyone. Yeah, great pictures. I haven't seen some of those pictures, so That's Rocky and Mara over there with you, and I agree. Actually, the north is not as beautiful, I guess, at the south. And no, just it's great to hear you. Actually, we're very concerned about Omicron, though. It's a high rate of here is high rate. People is really concerned.
So anyway, Vic, way less than here. When you talk about here, like 400 a day, I think Chile's at 30. So Hampton County's bad. But thank you, Nico. I sent Nico a link today, just an hour ago. Said, hey, if you're around, log on in, because he's always saying it's midsummer there and beautiful. The south looks like the when you go to the south of Chile, it looks like Alaska. It's light out almost 24 hours a day, or the Canadian Rockies. Spectacular. Oh, Chile's nice because you can rent a car, drive around, very, very safe, and not expensive. And as I said, we were the only tourists there, and I think it's nice to give business to people again. So, but those peaches, I can just taste them right now because they're not exporting those. They don't taste like you get them off the tree in Chile right now. But going back to here, and this is the house we rented, which was less than $200 a night, split between us, whatever. And that's the beach in the background, and that's Gail writing some postcards or playing a game in the morning. So you can get some really nice places in Chile right now. Again, it stays light to 9:30. So that's my Chile plug. And next slide is going to be the best European city. And somebody asked me that a while ago, said, I want to go to Europe. And my favorite area of the world you see later on is Asia, Southeast Asia. But somebody said, I want to go to Europe, and I've been to all the European cities and I like them, Paris, Venice, Rome, Athens, London, all of them I've spent some time in. But the one day somebody said, where would you go? One European city, I can go any place. Where would you go? And I'm going to say someplace. I don't know if anybody's been there before. And I was totally shocked because I hadn't been there in 40 years. We decided to go on our own, not on a tour, 40 years for our 40th anniversary. And that was to Moscow. When I show you some of the stuff from Moscow, which is kind of in Europe and that part of it, it was amazing. It was totally surprising where it's at today. And considering right now, the Soviet Union or Russia is thinking of invading Ukraine, and where it seems like the war might be happening, it's just someplace totally different. And when I show you kind of some highlights of that trip, I think you'll be shocked. We just went to JFK, hopped on a plane, 8.5 hours later we're in Moscow, and had an incredible time. And you don't even notice when you're there any of the politics or anything, way less than here. We're out there and people were great, and I'll back to that later. But it's a shock, just hop on a plane. Now, this is the summertime, of course. I'm not going there in the winter. But we were there around Labor Day, and it was just absolutely spectacular. Museums, which a little bit, but traveling in the countryside, just going on our own. Most unique country is, zoom back to here. Oh, there it is. So this is the best European city right there, Moscow. That was the entry part. Most unique country, Bhutan. Has anybody, by the way, go back to here. Has anybody been to Moscow yet? Raise your hand. Yeah, some people. So I don't know how long ago it's been, but we didn't go on a tour, and getting off in the back roads was really spectacular. Most unique country, Bhutan. Anybody been to Bhutan? Raise your hand. Bhutan is, as you can see over here, Bhutan is, there's Nepal, there's Bhutan. Up here is the Tibetan plain or plateau. Laksa is someplace here, over 10,000 feet high. There's a little piece of India separating Nepal and Bhutan, and both of these are amazing places. And Bhutan had no roads until 1990. And I remember reading about a guy that hiked to the border to see what a car in a road looked like. So before 1990, there are no roads. Now there's like one road going left to right across the country. There's only one airport. The one bus just kind of goes left to right, and whenever it stops, you can sit there and sit by the side of the road waiting for it to come for a day. There's been little TV things on that. And then when it comes, and lets you off where it lets it off. It's very constant. The company's in 80% of the country is protected. They believe in nature. The main language is English. It's a remarkable place. That's Bhutan. Next, best lodge to lodge interesting hike, and I've done this hike twice, is Nepal. Nepal is a great area to go, walking from lodge to lodge. And I love these hikes where somebody will take your stuff, you walk, and you can sleep in a really nice place, in a nice lodge, have a good meal at night, shower, they have jacuzzis outside, but you still walk, and you have a Sherpa take your stuff with you. And the scenery was spectacular. And if you go like in the fall, like October, November, December, 0% chance of rain. Blue skies every day, absolutely spectacular. And unlike, we did go to New Zealand and did it lodge to lodge, and why that doesn't make the list is I didn't realize till afterwards we were in the third rainiest place on the planet, and it rained every single day. Still had a great time, but kind of sunshine makes a little bit up for, I'll take the sunny place over the rainy place any day. And there are places where you can go where there's no chance of rain. Most memorable lodge, Gondrak. I'll always remember this place. Went to it twice, actually. So here we are. I ended up starting in maybe 20 years ago, just taking groups of people around. Some of our friends is like, and would cap it like 6 couples. You know, I'd put a little thing out, we're going here, who wants to go? And they'd fill up in a second. And so we had 12 of us, because that's what's beautiful for these lodges. They have a capacity usually of 12. And so we would book the whole thing. You had to do it ahead of time. And this was about a 3-day walk, you know, or 4-day, maybe 4 days to get there. And then you had 4 days, we came out someplace else. Nobody's getting to this lodge by car, bus, helicopter, or anything. You walk and you have breakfast outside. These are surrounded by the marigolds. The mountains that you see in the distance, this is number 3 in the world. Mount Everest is like 29,000 feet, and these mountains are like 26,000 feet. So we're talking high. We are probably here down in this valley at about 8,000 feet, 9,000 feet. So here we are having breakfast. During the day, the weather was in the 60s and 70s. At night, it maybe got into the 40s. The lodges had down jackets for you to wear at night. You didn't have to carry them yourself. And the food was really, really good. We'd all eat family style every meal, just whatever they were serving. No choices, no nothing. But it was just all wonderful. It was all great. And I did this hike twice. We did it just with Gail and myself once. Then I said, let's take a group of people and come back. And I'll do this hike again in a second.
Hey, Rich, where do you stay in that 4 days till you get to the lodge?
Oh, there's more of these. So it's lodge to lodge to lodge. So you hike to one lodge, you stay, and they're all beautiful. But this is the one I remember just eating with the marigolds outside. So there's a bunch of lodges that they built. And how'd they build these lodges? They had to carry stuff in on backs, you know, backpacks, and get from the local stone, comes from the area, you know, the materials. So they build these lodges in a number of these places we've gone to. Even in New Zealand, the lodges are in the middle of nowhere. They have beautiful, there's a lot of places you can go to where they've built lodges that you can trek from. And I've read about them in National Geographic and places like that, which gives me ideas of how to do these lodge to lodge treks. Now, New Zealand, they don't have anybody to carry your stuff for you. You carry it yourself. Peru, we did it, and you have donkeys carry your stuff. Here, they had Sherpas carry your stuff. So then my best ever cruise. This is another amazing thing, very inexpensive trip. I decided we're gonna take a cruise boat. And this, by the way, is our cruise boat down here at the bottom. We had 2 of these, they're long boats. And we went from Luang Prabang, Laos to Luang Nampha, Laos, up the Mekong River. And you can see the scenery here. We stayed in little huts and villages along the way. We took a beautiful hike in the woods. The people were incredible. The experience was incredible. And again, if I get time, we're going to go over all these in more detail later on. But this is just the winners of my categories. So if people think of best river cruise, people think of going in Europe, I would say, take me back here up the Mekong River. And, you know, you're spending probably, I don't know, $30, $40 a night per person. You know, it's like inexpensive, and you have a great time. Let's see. Most surprising continent is Africa. And in Africa, in one of my most surprising countries was Uganda. How did I end up in Uganda? And I think that's the place in the Book of Mormon where the guy ends up going, Uganda, you know, singing that song about that. But Uganda is pretty remarkable. So I was looking for an airplane ticket, because we've been to Kenya and Tanzania, and I've been to Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Botswana, Namibia. So I said, I want to go back to one of those countries, but I couldn't find any good airfare to any of those countries. But Uganda, there was plenty of free tickets using frequent flyer miles. Nobody wanted to go to Uganda. So I said, let's go to Uganda. And Uganda was quite remarkable. It used to be called the Emerald of Africa, you know, the Pearl of Africa, right in the middle. Hemingway used to go there all the time. But it's I got this guy and a driver, and he just drove us all over the country and went to villages and the wildlife. It was spectacular. But we're driving down a road. This is towards a park, not even in a park. We're going towards Queen Elizabeth Park. And if you look at the size of these elephants, these are big elephants right here. But that guy in the back is the biggest elephant I've ever seen any place, anywhere. This is like the Jolly Green Giant of elephants over there. right here. And all of a sudden we're driving the car down the road. He's coming at us. And my driver put the car, we had a big giant Land Cruiser. And I said, why can't we stay and let him catch up to us so we can see him closer? He goes, no, no, no. He can flip us with his horns in a second. And he drives backwards for 2 or 3 miles. There's a guy behind the elephant in a motorcycle right over here. You can see over there. And the elephant's coming towards us. Eventually the elephant stops and we stop. And then this huge herd, his harem, crosses the road, maybe 20 some odd elephants left to right, there's kids. And when the last one goes in, this guy looks at us and he goes in and follows him into the woods. So that was just a natural thing that just happened on the road in Uganda. A lot of other great things happened in Uganda. And I want to go back to Uganda. That was on my list. I'd be there already. I don't, with COVID, I trust Chile, but I don't think I'd want to be in a place without good medical care, until, COVID is, or I take some of that Paxlovid pills with me. If I catch it, I can take the pills and avoid anything bad happening. So that would be a place like Uganda, but I definitely want to get back there again as soon as it's viable. Great spot. And then of course, almost wherever we go, we bike, because when you bike, you can see things you don't see from just walking around or doing other things. And that's a picture of us biking in Tanzania before that Uganda trip. Again, with Africa, probably the best single experience, magical experience. We had a hike up into the mountains and we came face to face. I took those pictures. They were just a couple feet from me. Those are chimpanzees, which can actually be more dangerous than gorillas. And the gorillas, the mountain gorillas, that's a silverback. And just hanging out with them, they're going around, you're supposed to stay low so you're not higher than them. Just a small group of people went. There were 6 of us hiking into the woods. You might have to walk 2, 3, or 4 hours to get to them. And then you follow them for a bit and then you leave. But it does take some work. Nowadays, they know where, they track where where they are. Nothing's guaranteed. But if you're older, they'll take you to like we are, they'll take you to the place that's closer. And the young kids that are in their 20s and 30s, they could hike 5 or 6 hours to see them. We might get there in 2 or 3 hours to see them. So it's not so bad, but it's remarkable. The best lodgings is the Japanese Ryokan. And by the way, how many people have been to Africa before here? Anybody? Yeah, so you think of Africa, as all the stuff you see in the news, but when you get there to a lot of these countries, it's spectacular. Great people, beautiful scenery, a lot of green. And I was just surprised about everything I saw in Africa. So Japanese Ryokans, those are B&Bs, little bed and breakfasts, and they're all over the place. And you can get there by taking the bullet trains. And when you stay in a Japanese Ryokan, even if you're strangers, they have these kimonos in your room. You put on the kimonos and you go down and have dinner with everybody, all in your kimonos. And the dinners are quite elaborate Japanese feasts with like 20 or 30 different items that are really tiny. Who knows what most of it is, but it's all delicious. So all your meals are like that. And then there's no showers or bathtubs in the rooms. You go down to the bath. There's a male bath and one for the women, one for the men. They show you how to sit on a little stool. You wash yourself off. You sit in the hot tub and soak. You relax. You go back and you wash yourself off again. And they give you a little bitty towels to dry yourself off with. So just the experience of going from Ryokan to Ryokan and then seeing the scenery around it was remarkable. And that's in Japan. And hopefully Japan opens up again. Very modern. And one of the things I used to stay away from Japan because I don't like going where there's a lot of cigarette smoke. And even though a lot of Japanese smoke, Japan had way more restrictions on smoking. And this is a few years ago than here. You can't just walk down the street smoking a cigarette, period. You have little areas, even outdoors, where you have to go in with fenced in area if you want to light a cigarette. Unlike here, you can be walking down New York or Boston behind people smoking. Not there. And so I thought there was actually almost more restrictions than here, believe it or not. And so I really enjoyed Japan. Best remote island. When we were in Japan over here, I just read about this thing called Ishigaki Island. Probably nobody's ever heard of Ishigaki Island before. And you could take a $99 flight. It's probably as far from, this is Osaka here, Tokyo's like up around here. And you can just take a $99 flight. It's 1,400 miles. It's like the same as going from Boston to Miami. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, you're in Ishigaki Island. We rented a car. And we were the only non-Japanese on that island. 0 Westerners, nobody, just us. And then other Japanese, because the Japanese go there for their tourists to go to enjoy the island. Beautiful beaches, we kayaked, went to waterfalls, and had great food. Of course, we didn't speak Japanese, nobody spoke English, but we managed to get around and make do, and it was a great experience. And I'd highly recommend to visit Ishigaki Island, just so you see where it is. That's Taiwan over here. So it's this little island. Getting there from Taiwan is very expensive, but getting there from Japan is very cheap because it's a Japanese possession. Taiwan is like an international flight and everything. Even though they have little flights there from Taiwan, it's a much different process. So Ishigaki Island, again, I'm trying to show you things that are probably not on people's bucket list because you never thought about them, even though might not even known some of them existed. And they're pretty easy to do. I remember they had a special to Japan we got for people. It was Air China was trying to, sell some seats. This is when we went, and it was $4.99 each way all the way to Tokyo, from New York and back. Sometimes you can't go to Chicago for that price, almost, or Los Angeles. And my favorite area, Southeast Asia, and there's Richie Steingart, if anybody knows him. I love Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Thailand. I used to go to Thailand just about every single year for business or for just hanging around. We went on vacation to Vietnam 5 times. A lot of people said, there's chilly now, but where would you go on vacation? I used to tell people Vietnam. It's once you're there, very inexpensive, very, very safe. You don't hear about terrorist acts or any of that in Vietnam, or don't worry about walking down the streets in Vietnam. Spectacular scenery, nice people, but this is actually Thailand at an elephant preserve where you could actually go swim in the water with the elephants. And we took my grandkids there too. They're a little intimidated. The elephants, it's a little muddy and slippery. So what you got to be careful of is if the elephant and they decide to lie down and put their feet in the air and they're just playing, but you don't want to get under them because they weigh thousands of pounds and you don't want to be stuck between the elephant and the bottom of the river. So that's the only thing. You got to be really careful of slipping. Those are that's my favorite. I just saw this picture when I was going through these. That's my favorite fruit and my least favorite fruit side by side. On the left are durians. They're the stinky fruits. When you go into hotels or rent a car in Asia, there's big sign saying no durian allowed. I did try it once and I had a bottle of mouthwash that I don't know how effective it was, but people think it's the biggest luxury, the way it tastes. And on the right are mangosteens. And mangosteens are absolutely my favorite fruit in the world. Somebody says, you can have a piece of fruit. What would it be? Mangosteens. Occasionally they sell them for $2 a piece at the Asian market in Springfield. And when you go there and they're ripe, they're like free basically. They're all over the place and they're delicious. They have this incredible white fruit inside if you see in the lower right corner. So if you can ever find a mangosteen, it's worth $2 to buy one and try it. They're my favorite fruits. Anybody ever had a mangosteen before? Anybody? They don't taste like mangoes, but they're Nico. Nico's saying yes, because Nico ended up living in Thailand for a while. So he managed to have some mangosteens over there. Over here is the most challenging hike we ever did. And I don't know if we ever want to do that again. Glad we did it once, but we actually hiked. They have this trip, and I read about this in National Geographic also. We flew to Cusco, you drove down here, and then you could hike the Salcante Trail to Machu Picchu. And Machu Picchu was never on my bucket list. But when I got there, it blew me away. It was far exceeded expectations. But to get there, we walked over a 15,200 foot pass. This was another 7-day hike from lodge to lodge. We had donkeys carried the stuff, so you didn't have to carry your own stuff except a day pack. And 15,200 feet, even though we acclimated for a bit before, like at Lake Titicaca, it was, when I got above 15,000, my head started to pound. We didn't have oxygen with us. Once I got below 15,000, I was okay. Some people were sick above 14,000, but so it is very high, and I don't want to be 15,000 feet again voluntarily, but it was definitely worth it. This is where us at the peak over here. And actually an interesting thing you can do in Peru is you can fly. We flew to Lake Titicaca. That was at 10 or 11,000 feet first. And there was an island right in the middle that you could stay at, a little resort kind of thing that was gorgeous. Then there's a train that we took from here all the way to Cusco. And that was spectacular. And then from there, we came here and did the hike over the mountains to Machu Picchu. So that's a little bit of the Peruvian trip. And then on the way back, we had the plane landed in Lima, because I know I'm not going to get there. It's one of the last slides. When the plane landed in Lima, We got to 2, it left for the United States about midnight, and they have some of the best restaurants in the world in Lima. You can get incredible tasting food. There's a place called Central, a place called something something. You got to make reservations. We had enough time. I did this so that we could take a cab to the restaurant, have a beautiful dinner, and get back to the airport by midnight to catch our connection. Otherwise, there's not that much to see in Lima. But those restaurants are some of the best in the world, you know, for kind of tasting menus and things. Most remote resort was the Napo in Ecuador. Ecuador is like almost 4 countries in one. We've been a few times to Ecuador. And there's the Galapagos, which is like a whole country in itself. There's the coast, the north coast of Ecuador, which has some spectacular rafting and scenery and lodges to stay in. There's the mountains like Otavalo, where you see those, you know, where the people are wearing the typical native dress. And then there's the Amazon. So we flew down from, I'll go back to here, went up the other way. Okay, we flew from, oh, wrong direction. Okay, we flew from 45 minutes from Quito down to Coca. And then at Coca, you take a speedboat, 3 hours, and then you paddle this little canoe thing 3 more hours, and then you're at this resort. And you're right there in the middle of the Amazon. We went on night paddles, took walks, saw incredible wildlife. And believe it or not, I didn't get any mosquito bites. Yes, we did see some 5-inch big tarantulas and other things, and anacondas and some snakes. But, you know, the bugs, you know, you think you go there, maybe it's because there's, you just, even in Africa, I never can remember really having mosquito bites like I would in Maine or New Hampshire. I think up in those places, they have to bite you in just July. They got July and June. And so they have to get all their biting in. When you go to a place like this, it's year round. So it's really not bad for those kinds of bugs. Best cruise, Ha Long Violet. And that's through Ha Long Bay in Vietnam. You can spend 3 days, 2 nights on this boat. There's only 4 rooms, 4 couples, and you kayak, paddle, they have classes on board. And so absolutely, that's an incredible cruise to take. I was talking to the person at the, one of the people that took care of you in the rooms at this Ha Long Violet. Again, 3-day, 2-night cruise with everything included was somewhere around $400 a person at the time. I mean, these are not huge ticket items considering, but I said, who had our room before us or before us? And he was telling about this, that the previous cruise, they had to call up every single, client, the 8 that were on it, and tell them you couldn't come because it had been commandeered by, this is at the time, by Gaddafi's kids. And they'd sit there, and he said they were the most obnoxious people. They said they wanted like a tuna fish sandwich. You got to go find some tuna. But he said at the end they tipped, and the government made them cancel the trips because I guess they bought oil from Libya at the time. And so they had the room prior to us at that boat. So they didn't cancel ours. Best tropical area. So French Polynesia. We did a trip in New Zealand. New Zealand was gorgeous. And it's 13 hours or so from New Zealand nonstop to Los Angeles, but it's 5 hours from New Zealand to French Polynesia and 8 to Los Angeles. So it's right on the way. So we actually flew back by going New Zealand to French Polynesia, spent about 10 days there, went from island to island, and the out islands are amazing. Again, you don't run into many people. And since there's a ring of coral about a mile out, it's like a swimming pool around the islands. It's not wavy. So it was hot, but with the breeze blowing, it was very comfortable. And you could actually, a lot of the restaurants were in the water. And so you're here eating in the water, and you have little 2-foot-long black-tip reef sharks coming to beg for food. It's like birds coming, but they didn't bite you or anything. They were just swimming around saying, can we have some scraps? Can we have some scraps? And different colored fish will be at your feet. And it's just, I always remember French Polynesia. The picture is not that clear, but down here you can see the color of the water. It's great for snorkeling. The water was about 90 degrees. So highly recommend French Polynesia. And one person had said, I guess the Murphys, there's Galapagos, the most unique wildlife. Most people think you have to do Galapagos on a cruise. 99% of the people that do Galapagos do it on a cruise, like a little boat that takes you from place to place. You can do it on the land. So there are lodges. You can go to the main islands and stay on land without having to, if you're worried about seasick, just bouncing up and down. And when you go into the different tourist areas, you have to get on these little white boats anyway.
Yes, it is.
excuse me, we can mute everybody, please. We can, you got the white boats. So even if you're on a cruise, these local white boats take you to where you're going. If you're on the land, they pick you up at a dock on land and take you to what you're doing today. So you're out there on the water for the day. The seals will come, and I did scuba diving too, and look at you right in your mask. The birds didn't run away. Things aren't afraid of humans. And that's what makes the Galapagos pretty darn special. And it was also interesting, when we landed on one of these islands, I saw a plane off on the runway parked by itself, because we got there by one plane into one island. You can fly out, there's 2 airports. So I chartered boats to take us from island to island, and then we flew back from the other. But on this one island, there was a plane sitting there, and it had the Red Sox logo on the back. And the owner of the Red Sox, John Henry, had flown down. He had his boat driver drive the boat all the way from Boston, all the way down the Galapagos, so they could spend a week with his, at the time, his fiancee. They're now married, Linda Henry Bizzuto. And I was actually went scuba diving, and I was scuba diving with his plane driver. The guy that drives the plane gets to hang out for a week, and well, waits for John Henry to fly back, and he was scuba diving with me on my little scuba diving trip. So he's telling me the interesting story. So it takes weeks to drive that boat from Boston, where it's docked, down to the Galapagos, and yet he just flies down on his Red Sox plane. So it's just interesting seeing the Red Sox in the Galapagos.
How do we turn it down?
Okay, so over here, best city to go out of your way for a layover whenever I'm traveling, if I can. I love Singapore. Singapore has great food. At all the activities at night. It's hot during the day, but at night you go out, people walk around, the markets, the stalls, the different neighborhoods, the ethnicity, the night zoo for grandkids. You know, we've gone there a few times. It's a zoo that opens up at 8 o'clock at night and closes at 2 in the morning. And you walk around in the dark, and yet all the animals, these are all these night animals that are out there, and you can see them like this kind of light they have. And it's spectacular, just really a great experience. But they have all kinds of amazing things in Singapore. So it's very modern, and there's a lot of competition. So you can stay like at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel for, you know, $200 a night. That's, you know, and there's so many luxury hotels that unless you're going at a holiday, you can find some good deals in Singapore. I have honorable mentions that I can't even get to today. And honorable mentions would be Sri Lanka is one. I don't know what category they fit in, but it was a great trip. This place we stayed at is an Architectural Digest. It won some awards, and we shared the room with the Steingarts. There was wild peacocks flying around, squawking outside. You can take little boats there. Sri Lanka is a pretty unique place, quite spectacular. And this is just one other slide, because I'm not going to get to it. It's from Sri Lanka. I rented this bus. We had 12 of us, a new bus. This is us in the bus. That bus for 10 days, just to get an idea, with a driver and a guide, was $10 per person per day. So it cost, that was for that bus. And it was remarkable. He just said, now the guy didn't speak that great of English, but what do you want for 10 bucks? They were really nice people, great drivers. That included gas, everything. So if you don't go through a travel agency, if you just kind of go through local, I go on the internet and find local companies to do this. They're not traveling. You know, if you go to travel agency, it's going to be $100 a person a day or something, or $200, whatever they can get for it. So you just want to say, I don't want to just get a total price. I just want to know, what do I charter the bus for? You know, so you charter the bus for a couple $1,000, you split it between 12 people, it works out great. And this is just some waterfalls. We went all over Sri Lanka in a course of like 10 or 11 days on that bus. Another honorable mention is Bali, not the beach in Bali, not where, because that's like a honky tonk where, you know, like Honolulu or Miami Beach, that you go up into the mountains of Bali, which is part of Indonesia, and it's green like I've never seen green before. And we stayed at a great lodge. Those are some mangosteens. The hotel kept my mangosteen bowl filled all the time. If I ate them, they would fill them up again. And it was mangosteen season at the time. And here we are biking some trail, and then we actually went rafting. That's a raft right there down this river, and our resort is on the right. We had a room here, so we spent rafting and ended up right at our resort after this raft trip down the river. Coffee plantations, tea plantations, nice beaches, nice people, of course, interesting food. So that's Sri Lanka. Honorable mention, Myanmar. I first went to Myanmar. I had customers in Myanmar, so part of being able to visit these places, I do have schools using us. And then I'd get off into the countryside. And Myanmar to me is, you know, you think of Cambodia and Angkor Wat. Well, they have some areas just like that that are even as spectacular up in Bagan. And that's Mount Popa. And there's this Thai restaurant right opposite Mount Popa that we're looking at, run by some Australians, hoping to get business. There wasn't many people there. And these are some kids in a classroom, was a one-room schoolhouse looking at us. Burma, you know, all the problems going on with Myanmar and Burma. This is 1998. And we had our guide. You know, I hired a guide, which was recommended by the school, one of my customers, and took us around to places, no other cars, you know, no traffic like Bangkok at the time, because so you sit there and you say, do you want to be like Bangkok, where there's cars and pollution and everything? I love Thailand. Bangkok's kind of crowded, or quite different place where there's really nothing. And certainly at the time, they were pretty anti-Western. So it's just, I like going to places that are different and seeing it, meeting the people, and you have some great experiences there. Those are just a couple of pictures we took in, I found in little places, a woman smoking whatever. And that scene on the right, I'll always remember because that's a girl, a young girl, you know, carrying heavy water back from the well. That's their drinking water. But that guy there, they told us he had lost his bucket and he was devastated because he was trying to use that pole to find his bucket in the water someplace. And that's what our guide told us. And just one little interesting story, I'm thinking of it. The guide, you know, instead of going to tourist areas, quote unquote, that the government might say you take people to, I said, you know, can we, you know, what about your family? Can we go to your house? And she took us to her house to meet her father, and her father was probably in his 80s, 90s. This is back in the time. And he was saying, you know, through her translating, that he actually fought for the, you know, at the time, he was actually fighting for anybody who was opposed to, he didn't like the government at the time. They were taken over, was by the Japanese. And then he helped, you know, he actually helped get rid of the Japanese by the military. And I guess the British controlled him at the beginning, and he helped anybody that wanted to get rid of whoever was colonizing him. So I guess he helped them get rid of the British, and then the next people, they helped get rid of them. And he said, looking back at my long life, you know, and how things are in Myanmar, he said, I'd take the British back in a second. And that's a 90-year-old guy who lived through all of the things and saying, give me the British back. Even when we got to control our own country, it got a lot worse. Honorable mention 4, Doubtful Sound, New Zealand. Some good weather there, and it's not the sound. Everybody goes to Milford Sound. We went to another one, Doubtful Sound. We rented a boat for a few days. That's us on the boat. It's a small boat. And the guy here, if you see the picture, the driver went down, says, excuse me, put his scuba tank on, and went down and picked up the lobsters off the bottom, and then cooked the most incredible lobsters we ever saw. That was dinner on the boat. But just a place to go. Doubtful Sound, New Zealand was pretty spectacular. And again, when you go in our winter, this is summer down there, and you can really enjoy just going to the different seasons with lots of sunlight. Best diplomatic trip. This is through the World Affairs Council of America. I just threw this in because it started with this spreadsheet, but this was 2014, where I was fortunate enough to be selected as a group to go to China. And China is a great place to visit too, even on your own. But this is at the US Embassy. That was our ambassador. This is when Obama was president. That's Max Baucus, was the governor. And then this right here is, I'll always remember this scene. Again, this is all part of travel. Sitting in this is the foreign ministry of China in Beijing. And this is speaking to an assistant minister. His name's Dai Bing, and he says, we make an effort to understand you, but you don't make an effort to understand why China takes the point of view it takes. And we had quite the conversation there with the 9 of us, and that's him right there, and I'm over here talking to him. And it was, you can talk about anything and all the different relationships between the two. And he's the guy that was negotiating with like John Kerry, the Secretary of State at the time, in all these negotiations for, you know, the climate conference in Paris, which we then later on got out of, and all the other issues having to do with China. And I looked him up recently, and he's actually responsible for, he's the #1 guy responsible for China's relationship with Africa. So you know what, China's doing a lot of colonizing of Africa right now with their Belt and Road issue. But one of the things that I got when the people we met in China, and there's, you know, 5,000 people in the Politburo of China, 95% of them have PhDs in engineering. And so that's just quite, so we're talking about a few of these guys, you know, I'm not saying you agree with everything they have, but they are smart people. And I asked one guy, he said, how'd you, you know, get in here? You know, what do you do? Because we're having dinner and stuff, you know, drinking some, whatever they had. And he was saying, well, you know, you go to school, you get a PhD in engineering, you have to finish in the top like 0.1% of your class, and your parents, if they're in the Communist Party too, you're probably in. So it's a bunch of things, you know, it's family, it's being smart, doing well in school. And so some of these guys that plan, you know, the future of what it's going to be 15, 20 years down the road, that's why they have the high-speed rail and all these other things that are organized. It's pretty impressive visit. So that's just, again, part of travel. And take up the whole time. We're not going to have much time to do much in detail, but I thought that, is a surprising thing, and I want to have questions at the end. And again, if there's another time for some of those trips, they're amazing trips, amazing experiences. I think you'll see. I can do this again sometime and finish off at any point in time if you like. My email, I shall send you my email. Let me know. I can even schedule a Zoom off hours anytime. If you want to interest in any of these trips and seeing any more, please let me know, because I love talking about them. Best European city, Moscow. So we flew to Moscow. I just bought a ticket. It took a while to get a visa. I used an agency, to get through all the visa. And the visa was, once you got that, you're on your own. Nobody restricts you to do anything. Make your reservations. I bought tickets to trains here, and then just kind of go whatever it takes us. We actually got there, and one of the mistakes that I made was I said, let's take the subway. And the subway in Moscow is beautiful on time, but Google Maps is how I get around, and it doesn't work down underground. So we got kind of lost lugging our suitcases around trying to get to Moscow. So I found out one of the best things to do is they did have Uber. And Uber, you can actually use the US app for Uber, say where it's in English, say where you want to go. They pick you up, and for just $2 later, they take you where you're going, so you don't get ripped off by taxi drivers. So a lot of countries that used to have Uber have their own version of Uber now. So you don't have, because it's a fixed rate. And doing it in English, the driver gets it in their language, takes you to where you're going, you get the receipt. It's an easy way to get around. That's how we went back to the airport with Uber. Going this direction for Uber, we took this subway, and it was a great experience, but we were pretty hot and sweaty carrying those suitcases as we went around in circles, not knowing where we were, until some nice person tried to point us in the right direction. So we actually stayed at a very reasonable cost, the Four Seasons Inn hotel in Moscow, right on the Red Square, kind of. This is the Kremlin over here on the left. I looked out my window, and it was just, there was tea house over there, beautiful parks. I just was surprised to see what I saw, considering I had been there 40 years ago, and what they're doing there now. Going out our hotel to the left, there's the entrance into the Red Square. Putin's office is back over here in the buildings. And this is looking back from outside at our hotel, the Four Seasons. A room right there facing the park was probably $300 and some odd. In the US would be $1,000, to get a room like the Park Plaza. So it was pretty reasonable considering, but we stayed at other places. When we travel, you might have a $300 a night room here. The bed and breakfast we stayed at another place was $17 a night. So it all averages out. We stay in a lot of places that are really nice, that are just a few dollars. And then some other ones, you'll treat yourself to some places like this. And so what we do first is we went over, we crossed the bridge, we walked. That's the Kremlin in the background. Kremlin kind of means walled area, which I didn't realize until we got there. And we went to rent bikes. And I found a guide that would take us on a bike tour of Moscow. And that's not normally how people see Moscow. Because when you take a bike tour, we end up going over 20 miles. You go in and out of the neighborhoods, you go all over the place, not the tourist sites. And again, part of what I'm showing here is not the museums, not the tourist sites, but just neighborhoods. And here we are. That's the guide that we had that took us through Moscow, and he took us through remote areas where there were bike paths through the city, which we thought was quite remarkable. He took us to a deli where we just pointed and picked what we wanted to eat from whatever these things were. Went out to the park over here. That's our bicycle. We had lunch in a park. And then as you go through Moscow in the summertime, so many streets are pedestrian streets, and they all have cafes. And this is like a tea house right there. I said, this is Moscow? This is not what I kind of would imagine. Look at that. That's like these streets. This is a pedestrian street set up like this, and people having tea, little kids there with little scones and things. And now we're biking by the Bolshoi Ballet, which was actually in the US at the time, so there wasn't a performance going on. That's the Bolshoi Ballet. People playing chess in the streets outside. That's where we parked our car 40 years before. That's the Lubyanka prison, where the famous KGB prison. A lot of bad things happened in there. We parked our car. There was no other cars there 40 years ago because we didn't want to get our windshield wipers stolen and other parts stolen from the car. This is in 1976, but now we just bike by the parking lot. Dunkin' Donuts, of course, and Starbucks was there. Then we biked across the river again. I'm just showing some highlights. This is Gorky Park. It's across the river from Moscow. Most tourists probably don't see that because we're biking through it. The people playing ping pong outside. An art museum is on the right. That's a beautiful bike trail in Moscow. And then we came to this park, and we have all the problems here in the country where everybody's taking away statues, what to do with them. Well, they actually have this area where they took all the old statues of your Lenins and your Stalins and all those guys that ran the KGB, and they're all sitting there in this park. That big hammer and sickle used to be at the entrance of the city. And so you can bike through this park and see all these old guys, and that's where they could put, like in the US, and then right here, here's the weeds growing around all these statues. So they took the statues, and so it's part of history. You don't have to destroy them, but I thought as a part of history to see them there was quite interesting. The stuff that you used to see. And this is just sitting outside our hotel. You could go get your picture taken with Stalin and Lenin, two guys dressed up. Now at night, this was another spectacular thing we just came across accidentally. You walk out our hotel, you go into the Kremlin over here on your left, and they were having this battle of the bands. It went on like almost every night we were there. And we actually asked our concierge to get us tickets at the hotel. And they did. They weren't very expensive at all. And notice Israel is on the banner there as the focal band that was at this battle of the bands. And we went and we were blown away because it was a laser light show, battle of the bands with hundreds of performers right there in Red Square. And that's St. Basil's Cathedral. And you can see hundreds of bands from all over the world. Those are like 20 or 30 military bands, all playing the St. Basil's Cathedral in different colors. And then a spectacular fireworks display over St. Basil's. So when you think of Moscow, you're not thinking of this normally. The average person doesn't think of this stuff when you think of let's go to Moscow and have a visit and the kind of things that are going on there. And then there's also a Jewish museum that we were pretty blown away by that too. I read about it. We went out, took an Uber there, and it's a Jewish museum and tolerance center. And there's activities going on today. If you go to their website, and they're trying to preach tolerance around the world. Putin actually inaugurated it, and it's on the order of, it's the Jewish shtetl, it's on the order of like the Holocaust Museum in the United States. Again, something that people don't hear about. We got on a train and went 100 miles away for a day trip to a little town someplace outside of Moscow. And we rented bicycles again, found a place that had a mushroom salad that was quite good because mushrooms are in season. And here we are biking up there. Then we got on the bullet train. We walked with our suitcases, and it's 450 miles from Moscow to St. Petersburg. And that train gets you there in 3.5 hours. And you don't have to go take a cab to an airport that's way outside. So the airfare was like only $60, but it would have been 2 hours in traffic to get to the airport. Then you have to get back from St. Petersburg, former Leningrad, into your hotel. This train was door to door, comfortable, and it did in 3.5 hours, 450 miles. So that would be like, going from here. I mean, the distance like Chicago would be 7 hours by bullet train, if they had trains. And those aren't even fast bullet trains like they have in China. This is the Winter Palace. This is, again, from the honeymoon 40 years ago. And Gail is still as beautiful as ever, 40 years later. And it's the exact same place with the railing. I tried to get the exact same picture at the exact same spot. That's the Blood Temple. This is walking around the streets of St. Petersburg. And of course, not just going to the regular tourist spots. We rented a guide for an afternoon, went off into the suburbs and biked around St. Petersburg, where you really got to go in where the people are and there's no tourists. In fact, most of the pictures you see, you never see any tourists around. That, though, for museums, and again, we don't do many museums per se. That's the Hermitage, one of the great museums of the world. Also the Summer Palace that Lenin invaded back in 1919. And the way most people see St. Petersburg is they come on a cruise boat because you don't need a visa. The cruise boat comes in the morning, they come in, they all take them to the Hermitage. They go through the Hermitage quickly and they all leave. And so just as a point of travel, whenever I do things, even if it's Italy or any place, everybody goes to the museums in the morning. Everybody on tours gets up and there can be a 4-hour ride, line at the big museums in Florence in the morning. But they close like 6 or 7. I'd get there at 4:30, no line, walk right in. You're the only people there. So my philosophy in travel is the early bird doesn't catch the worm, it catches the crowds. And if you can go at the end of the day, all the tours are gone, everybody's back relaxed. They're beat with touring. I say sleep late, enjoy the morning by the pool, and go late in the day or late in the afternoon and then late in the day, and you can avoid the crowds most places. So a Hermitage, people go into that side, but if you turn around in the square, there's the rest of the Hermitage over there. And if you're at the rest of the Hermitage, there's nobody in there. The tourists don't go there. They don't take the cruise boats there. And you walk in and there's all the great masters. That's Bobby sitting behind some, Van Goghs, just the whole place to yourself. And it's just a spectacular, spectacular museum if you're going to, looking for museums. And again, we don't do many. There's nothing like the Hermitage. Then Richie and I walked over a few miles to this place, and this was fascinating too. The State Museum of Political History of Russia, not necessarily on the tourist places. And when you go in, it's a beautiful museum, very well done. A few things are in English like this, and they really come down on how brutal Stalin's regime was. Like Stalin's regime lasted not only because of the repressing system, but also owing to the large-scale ideological, political, and educational work aimed at governing the collective consciousness and mass behavior. Stalin's propaganda formed the image of the Soviet state as a fortress besieged by enemies from the inside and outside. The image of an enemy with physical deformity or beast-like features, and I don't know how this translated from the Russian, was to cause the Soviet people hatred, desire to uncover and destroy him. Ideology also supported and justified purges. Stalin's regime, making people vote for the death penalty at numerous meetings, tried to make the population accomplice in its crimes. So really, it really goes in about, it's not kind to Stalin at all. And then they have his hat. This is Stalin's stuff and his history. And then that's the desk where Lenin's desk. And just the last thing, this is the balcony over here from this picture where Lenin was after this is 1919. This is the inside of the balcony. That's part of the museum, where he was beseeching to the crowds as the Soviet Union was being formed. On the way back, we saw all of this. These are the military that used to march through Red Square. And I was told a lot of it was fake. In other words, these are like models. These aren't real missiles that can be shot. That they just marched it through Red Square to make it look good. And then I saw, this is 2016, so I did see this at one of the little shops, Red Sox, Berioska doll. I didn't buy it though. And then we hopped on a train because the bullet train was 3.5 hours to get to St. Petersburg, but it didn't stop any place. So we wanted to go back and stop at the town of Novgorod on the way, so you had to take the slow train. And you could get a sleeper car and everything. So we took a Uber to this train station. We figured it out on our own. I bought all the tickets ahead of time online. And we went to Novgorod, and this is us 40 years ago. You can see it all, and this is almost the same picture right here. You can see the wall over here. And this has all been rebuilt, and there was some company with some mascots doing an exercise class. So this railing right here is now right here in this place in the little town of Novgorod. And the town of Novgorod is pretty cool because we stayed at this little 3 cats bed and breakfast. It was $17 or $18 a night. Very nice, in somebody's house, kind of in a neighborhood. And you got to walk around the neighborhoods, just go into the restaurants, not with tourists. Saw a kid, and this is just some other pictures. So much for the Soviet Russia. And I just think it's a very unique place to go. There's the Parises and the Romes, and they're all fantastic too. But I just thought that experience with the biking and being different and with different people, it was just, especially since the history between us and Russia and the Soviet Union, if you can hop on a plane and go there. And by the way, the entire time I was there, you didn't see Putin mentioned once. No signs, no pictures, no headlines. You saw somebody selling a t-shirt with him wrestling a bear once, but that's it. It's not like you'd think. It's just different. Most unique country, Bhutan. Bhutan sits here. Here's Nepal, here's Bhutan. We actually did one of those hikes in Nepal, then took a little plane over to Bhutan. And there's just one plane, one airport that goes. You can get to Bhutan from, I think, India has a plane, Nepal, and there might be one from Singapore, and that's it to get to Bhutan. And you can do both at once. It's an incredible country, love mother and protect Mother Nature. All these signs everywhere you go in English, all the sayings about being kind to nature. The secretary of the GNHC, this is actually the parking spot for the Secretary of Gross National Happiness. And that's a real cabinet position in Bhutan. And this is when we were up above 12,000 feet. That's a wild yak. Just looking at us. If you wanted to get out and pet them, the person that we were with said, no, don't do that. They can be ornery at times. And they exist above 12,000 feet. Bhutan's favorite vegetable or fruit is the chili. So they're growing everywhere. People are drying them outside their windows. And that's their national dish, chili cheese. I thought it was quite good. But you don't have to eat it. There can be some other things, but yes, it's spicy and it's delicious. So, and that's and where does the cheese come from? Yak cheese. It's yak cheese. And Bhutan is divided up into little zongs. I think it's DZONGH or whatever. And each zone has a building in the middle that's half a government and half religious. And they control the valley. So you go up over valleys. These valleys are shut off when the snows come, but the valleys are maybe at 7,000 feet. So they're actually pretty moderate in temperature year round. But to get in and out, you have to go like up over 12 or 13,000 feet, and those roads are closed off. We actually went rafting down this river. Things that we do on our trips are we hike, we raft, we kayak, we bike, walk, whatever it is, to see and meet and interact with people. And that's one of the zongs. Beautiful countryside there. And all the men wear this kind of dress called a go. And you're not allowed to wear pants till the monks retreat in the winter to the valley and they leave. And then you're allowed to wear warmer clothes. The women also have a national dress. So a suit and tie, this is what a man would wear if you go to the office and you're the head executive of like the airline, which you'll see the guy there a little bit later. They had a Black Crane Festival. Now, the other thing that blew us away, totally surprised, I didn't do my full research into Bhutan, but they're big into fertility, and phallus is the sign of fertility. So everywhere you go, everywhere you look out the window, painted on the walls of all the buildings, you'll see what you see right here. It's just regular street scenes. You don't get away from it. It's just unique and it's unique. And these women, we were hiking. This kid was 1 year old, so they're hiking up into the mountains to visit the monks to get blessed with a wooden phallus on their heads to, for being fertile a year ago. They're offering some thanks to the monks. So it's different. And then of course, at the end, we had to get a birthday cake for Bobby, our friend. And she was like pulling the hat over when she saw her birthday cake, because this was designed in good humor for Bhutan. And then up in the hills, Bhutan's one of the only countries that the monarchy actually, the king, and this is the queen, he went to Harvard, and he basically turned into a democracy. He stepped down, but he's still revered. He bikes around the country, and this is the head monk. And we just ran into them meeting at some rest area. And of course, here's the mountains. These mountains are over 20 some odd thousand feet. And you would see parades with the horns. All the buildings are alike. They all have the same architecture. So you have the same dress. These are the women. This is what the women wear. And this is what the men wear. This is a college right here. And so one thing with Bhutan is they integrated everybody. And that is one of the problems. When you hear, Springfield has a Bhutanese, refugees. And, I'm not commenting one way or the other on that, but what happened is Nepalese people fled Nepal maybe 100 years ago and went to Bhutan. Bhutan, as you can see, everybody wears the same dress. They have the same architecture. And the Bhutan people want the Nepalese to assimilate so that everybody is similar and we don't have divisions. And the Nepalese don't want to, and that causes them to not be treated nice by the Bhutanese. And then they ended up fleeing as refugees and end up seeking refuge in the United States, in Springfield. So when we have Bhutanese refugees, they're really Nepalese people who settled in Bhutan who are fleeing Bhutan because they don't want to assimilate to Bhutan ways, if you understand that story there. So we hiked up to the famous Tiger's Nest. And it says, if you're a good human being, then the skills and knowledge you acquire will benefit whole society. Otherwise, it's like giving a weapon to a child. Every place you go, you see sayings from their great religious Dalai Lamas and whoever it is, the people that are honorable. And then this was interesting. We just walked by a ceremony going on. This is the Longhorns. And if you can see what that is, that's butter. Why would they be taking hundreds of pounds of butter and putting it into this? We were invited into the ceremony. This guy here is the head of the Bhutanese airline. And every month they have this ceremony where they sacrifice something. And today it was like a few hundred pounds of butter so that they don't have any accidents next month. And they've never had an accident yet in their history, knock on wood or knock on butter. So this ceremony goes on every month. And we happened to just stumble across it where they were burning the butter per se in a religious ceremony for good luck. And these are things that I find that makes travel so worthwhile, the different kinds of things you see, the different kinds of experiences, and how not everybody does things like we do it. So the best lodge to lodge trek, this is, again, quickly on this, because I know we're gonna run out of time. This is the Annapurna Conservation Area. And this is the one where we hiked up there. I'm gonna just flip through this quickly. You can see the lodges. I highly recommend if, this is just an amazing trip. This is the one where we spent the 5 days or so getting there. Ken asked, what'd you do in between? Well, there are other lodges. And what's neat about Nepal, unlike Peru, is the trails go through villages. So the villages that you travel through, they do have electricity and they do have way better cell phone service than Long Meadow. I mean, every place. Now there's no cars, no trucks, but they somehow or other got these wires in here up and down these big mountains, but there's no roads, whether helicopters were done to do it. That these roads, these trails have been there for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, because there's lots of stone in the area. So these are all paved trails that go from village to village. And you meet people. So here we are heading down through this village. Then you go out the other side. You meet women in the fields on the way, guy carrying a little baby sheep. And when you come to a road sign, it says Pokhara, 30 hours that way. It's not kilometers or miles, it's 30 hours of walking. Now at our speed, that would be 60 hours of walking, not 30 hours of walking. I guess that's on an average speed. And you go through a village, they have doctor's offices, they have post offices, they have little lodges, they have restaurants, and then you walk out the other way. There's no road to get in there. You just keep walking, and this is the way to Patana. You go on to the next place. And here we are, this is the road, this is the trail, nice stairs, but here's people going up. This is the chicken delivery. They're carrying chickens up. And the guy's back. And we stopped to get momos. If you go to a Nepalese restaurant, they make these dumplings. And I didn't realize they were going to be made from scratch. They went out and got the chickens, basically, and sacrificed the chickens and rolled them. 2 hours later, we were taking naps out here. And 2 hours later, they're steaming the dumplings. And we ordered about 100 dumplings. And 2 hours later, we finally had them. It was quite an experience, quite a meal, and they were delicious at the time. We were starved. And then this is, again, proceeding down the trail. And this is another lodge right here. So we went from lodge to lodge. It's nice that the porters were carrying our stuff. And this is our friend in the morning with the sun rising over the 20,000-foot mountains. And then the best river cruise and hike is Laos, the Mekong River. This was spectacular too, very inexpensive. And we went down in the morning. It started, we were in Luang Prabang, and they have a really nice hotel there. It's good night with spa treatment, for one night of treating yourself. And then we offered alms to the monks in the morning. And then we went down to get our cruise boat. Because it was low water, we had 2 of these. So it was split up. We had 4 people in each boat. And we were going to be there. We have our suitcases down on the banks of the Mekong. And this is my friend Harvey. And he's pointing with good humor at his wife, who jumped out to help push their boat. I'm in the other boat to help push their boat off a sandbar when the water got too shallow. And that's what you do. This isn't like the cruise boat you'll see in a European river. We're all pitching in to help out. And the scenery was spectacular. And we stopped at different, and of course, weather's in the 80s and 90s. We stopped along the sides at villages. And there's a woman, their kids bathing. And when you went into the villages, you walk around, and we're like curiosities, like we're the first Westerners. People had seen kids gather around Rich as he showed them pictures. Rented bikes, went to some caves, and it says meeting hall of the provincial government, because that's where the government was hiding out when the US was bombing Laos, even though Nixon was saying we weren't bombing Laos. There's plenty of evidence of those bombs. Get to that in a second. This is when we stopped on the river for eat. What'd they do? They went in the woods and cut these banana leaves. They threw down whatever it was. We each had your own sticky rice. You would roll up the sticky rice and you'd touch it in whatever's the stuff in the middle, vegetables and whatever it is, and you'd eat it. It was delicious. Again, this is a scene from the river, the women just paddling up the river. What are those 2 things over here that are railings? Those are bombs. It says USA on the side. You go over here, here's a fence post. All the big posts are bombs. Over here is a bell in the village. US bomb again with USA on the side. Not something to be proud of, at least I'm not. and some kids. And on the river, this is like a little restaurant that we went to eat at. Some local person cooking stuff in a little fire underneath. And then there is a really nice hotel in Lanka that you can stay at. I read about it in National Geographic, and so we stayed there, very reasonable, right on the river. And then we started hiking into the woods again in Laos. You felt like, I kind of thought I was the troops, wandering around back in the Vietnam War days. Again, having lunch with the rice and whatever they're putting out there. Got to a village. This is the next morning because I wanted to pitch night, but we stayed overnight in this. And there's a dog getting warm by the fire, so it cooled off at night. And here we are inside the little house. We all slept together on mats, including some villagers. It was just whoever was in that building. And we had a ceremony at night where this is the villager, and he was tying string around everybody's arms in some sort of religious ceremony. And then we went out, and I'll always remember this. At night, the villagers came in, and they were singing, and we were singing, and whatever, and it was just quite an evening. And that was the fire the next morning in the light. And I always remember this picture. One kid was really curious, came over to Richie, played a harmonica for him. And then I remember that I took that picture of that woman. So that's just the hike from Laos. Eventually we hiked out the other way and got picked up. And the Salcante Trail in Peru, again, these are lodge to lodge trips. You stayed in this lodge and we headed off up over the 15,200 foot pass. This is again a National Geographic, you can read about it, or National Geographic Traveler. And the trail that we took is this trail right here all the way. And we had a 911 donkey that followed us just in case with supplies, the donkeys went off. There was a rest area on the way up the hill. That was the person with her baby that kind of manned the rest area. You could buy souvenirs or some food. Here's the donkey train carrying our stuff. It passed us at a point. Up the hill. That's all of us at the peak. And then we started going down there. Oh, they had a place to have lunch up there. Boy, were we tired. I never thought I could get up again. And now we reached the lodge. So there are lodges, and they took the stuff in on donkeys to build these beautiful lodges. There was a hot tub in the back. In fact, the hot tub in the right corner, it's right here. And there we are. There was a birthday party for somebody. There was 12 of us. 6 were young that we had met there, and our 6. And they made the trip in probably half the time we did. And Richie was sleeping already because it was quite the day. We went at sunrise and got there at sunset. It's a 12-hour walk, longest I ever did. And this is where the people that drove the horses and the donkeys stayed. We stayed here, and the scene was just out of the west. The only way to get to this place is hiking. You're in the remote Peru, up in the mountains. And then we started going downhill. We went downhill, it got greener and greener until we got to the tropics, into the Amazon. Another lodge with a dinner laid out. Another lodge, and then we got to Machu Picchu. And Machu Picchu was as spectacular as ever. And the last walk we did this is Huayna Picchu. They have a certain number of licenses, and we climbed up to the top of that. And there I am at the top of that, looking down on Machu Picchu. It really was spectacular. And on the way back in Lima, we stopped at that restaurant for dinner, and you can see you had like 20 dishes of all whatever it was and laid out like a story time. So Lima, Peru has some great trips. Africa. I'm not showing the normal things in Africa, but we met people, went to see a wedding with a goat being sacrificed. This is an airport. When we got there, a lion jumped on us and had been sleeping in there overnight. When you go, if you haven't been to Africa yet, many of the safaris, you walk and then you find they have breakfast set up for you someplace in the woods. There's great islands and beaches in Africa. And the gorillas, the chimpanzees walking into them. That's the equator in Uganda. Hippos, that's that big elephant walking towards us before the elephants crossed. That's the elephants crossing I showed you earlier. And then after they left, the big guy made a turn. He gave us the eye and he walked into the woods, and then we could go. That was a baby hyena playing with her cub. That's the state bird of Uganda, the crown crane. And then here we are hiking up into the woods to see the gorillas. Yawning, they're right behind you. Some villages we went through. And then we went to bikes, of course. Villages, gave out some soccer balls. We went to Rwanda. this is an interesting border crossing because we drove from Uganda into Rwanda, and that's a unique border crossing. It's the only place in the world where you can drive from people that drive on the right side of the road to the left side of the road. I can't remember which was which. And maybe it's left, I think left in Uganda to right in Rwanda. So there's a sign, you actually cross, the traffic X's and crosses to the opposite side when you cross the border. And this is where we are, really close to the gorillas. And it is a rainforest, and this right here is that was the silverback charging to get rid of this teenager that was like standing there, and the silverback came pounding his chest in order to scare the other guy away. So I don't have, I know we're out of time. I want to see if there's questions. You haven't seen the remainder of stuff from Thailand to everything else in some of those other areas. But if anybody wants to see anything, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Happy to take any questions for anybody, or if anybody wants to see any of those winners that you haven't seen yet, I'm happy to show them to you. Those that want to sign off after an hour and 35 minutes straight of listening to me, I thank you for listening. Anybody have any questions? Does anybody want? Everybody can unmute yourselves.
I'll just jump in and say thank you so much. Those photos were amazing. Your stories were even better. You've seen so many wonderful things, and so thank you for sharing them with us. And I will tell you, I did the random number generator, and the Howells won the luggage, so I'll be in touch with them. And if they for some reason pass, I'll find the next random person. But thank you all for being here. Thank you to Rich. And if you want to unmute yourself for any questions for Rich, you can.
Yeah, I'm not going anyplace this afternoon. So anybody wants to sit there and ask me anything, anybody wants to see any of the other places that were winners, I'm happy to sit there and Zoom's free, not going anywhere. I'm happy to sit there and talk about anything you want to talk about. So any questions, you can just raise your hand, your real hand, if you have any questions or anything. Lorraine?
Yes, I actually put my question initially in chat. What do you do about languages when you're in such countries that have such unique languages? Does everyone have somebody at least there who speaks the English for us, or how do you deal with that?
No, that's an excellent question. And I've never really, I don't speak any other language. I mean, I can get around in French, in Spanish, I understand what people are kind of saying. But many countries, like Chile, for example, I had Nico with me, but Chile, very few people speak English, as a matter of fact. Places in China, that was the one. We went to Russia, Soviet Union, and I learned the Cyrillic alphabet. I could learn stop. I could learn some of the things to read it. People didn't speak English, but you can get through. And that was before we had Google Translate. Google Translate does work pretty well. You can even show it on a sign and see what it says. When we met somebody, you can actually talk into it now, certain languages, and it will talk back to them, and they could talk to you and it would talk. So Google Translate is a big advantage. You go to a museum, like in Russian, the stuff's in Russian, I can hold my phone up and it reads it in Russian and I read it in English on the phone. So they have some pretty good things that are out there to help. But when I remember being in Ecuador and being in a cab trying to get to the airport, and I'm making a motion like this of airplane, airport, trying to make do. So I've always managed to get through. And I remember I rented bicycles in Beijing one of the first times I was there. I can't read the Chinese road signs for the life of me. I can't read a road sign in China. So I had to keep my finger on the map. That was before Google Maps, in order to know where I was. Because if I got lost, I couldn't figure out where to go. Now with Google Maps, it makes a huge difference. I can get around any place, even in Beijing. You can go up and down through the neighborhoods in Venice. So Google Maps is a godsend. You can download the maps before you go out, so you don't have to be on their cell phone service. So that's the big change right now. But I've always managed to get through. We just actually had some Afghan refugees staying with us for the last 2 months, and they just moved to a wonderful apartment, and they didn't speak any English either. And Google Translate is not so good with Pashto, but we may do. And they're picking up some words, and we could call somebody for help, that did speak both, because we, that work for the Jewish Family Services. So it's hard, but you can always make do. When I go to restaurants often, I point to somebody else, say, what they're having, because I like trying different things. I want to try something I've never had before. So I'll get that. You can make do.
Nice. Thank you.
Good question. It's interesting. Some countries do. You can always find speakers. Other countries you can't. Even in some of the hotels. And Chile is one where, was surprising. But fortunately, I had Nico with me. There's some stuff we could have done under COVID. Nico's over here, who's with us. For example, we went to the national park and they have these hot springs. And the park was limiting itself. In the US, a million people would go in the hot springs. This is outdoors. It was limited to basically one group, 8 people per hot spring. And so you had to make the reservations for the next day. And I couldn't have even figured that out, but he did it in Spanish, of course. And so there's a lot of things. I mean, some national parks were closed. Things are really limited, trying to keep people safe, from COVID as best as possible. So I don't know, even with Omicron, it's probably going to get someplace, but what they're doing is going to help, keep it as safe as possible. Anybody else? No. Well, thank you. Does anybody want to see any, if you want to see any of those other winners that you didn't see, let me know. I can show you any of that stuff, more of Thailand, Asia, some of the unique places. Otherwise, if there's to send me an email, if anybody's interested in any details, like you want to do a trip like that, I have a lot of the contact information and things of, where to go and how to arrange some of the things. But they've been, fairly, moderately priced trips to low price trips by being out with the people and just walking, biking, things like that. Nico.
On your bucket list, what other trips are due yet to be done?
Well, Chile was good. It was on the bucket list for a while. We actually did put down a deposit on a Norway bike trip right when COVID was starting, and that got postponed 3 times already. So it's still going to be in the fall, next fall, if it happens. Norway's still been closed, but I really like to go back to Africa again. I like to go back to Uganda and take some people to see what makes it nice when you do it with a small group of people. And that's what makes nice for Africa, is to have those small lodges, to have a place where people eat family style meals. Like, and that's Africa's perfectly suited to that. So it's not like going with a group, everybody's here and there. It's like family style. And those lodges in Africa can be spectacular, nice tents. They're tents, but they're comfortable with beds in the tents, and they fill up the thing with hot water. In the morning at 6, you can pull the handle and you get 5 gallons of hot water. But they're great. And then everybody eats breakfast together and lunch together and dinner. You take a hike. So going to places that are suited for that. And I stay away from Europe, but for a couple of reasons. I mean, Europe, I certainly like. Moscow's different because Europe is way more expensive. There's no way to do the kind of trips I'm doing in Europe with that number of people for that kind of cost. Although somebody was going to Italy. Italy, the one on my bucket list for best hikes is Cinque Terre. Although it got really overcrowded, that's that hike. That's a fantastic hike. I've done that a few times. Highly recommended. There's 5 towns you can walk along on the coast, kind of to the west of Florence. But I heard there was some damage and some big floods not too long ago. So you got to check on that. And they were limiting how many people can go on it. You have to get a license in advance, but it's really worthwhile. But it's more expensive. They don't have those little more lodges kind of things, where everybody sits outdoors and eats. It's a little more complicated, way more expensive. You can't get a bus to take people around Rome for $10 a day a person. It would be many hundreds of dollars a day a person. So just kind of cost thing. But I like looking at different places that are third world, more different, way different from what you're used to here. And each experience each day is something new. Yes, Lorraine.
Yes, I heard that there are no longer quote unquote youth hostels. There are just hostels so that anyone of any age. Have you had any experience with that, or could you recommend anything like that as well?
First, when I did my hitchhiking trip, I stayed at quote unquote youth hostels, which were also elder hostels. They had youth hostels and elder hostels. So they only discriminated against people in between. And the youth hostels were really good. I mean, I stayed, you had to do a chore, you stayed in dorm, it's like bunk dorm kind of housing. And they were in some great places. The former Olympic Village in 1960 was the youth hostel in Rome. One of Franco's palaces in Spain was a youth hostel. A big fort in the corner of Portugal, down by the very corner of Portugal where Columbus sailed from, was a youth hostel now. Of course, to find these places before Google Maps was not easy. They were all hidden in the most hardest place to get to. And they were only a few dollars a night. So I did stay in youth hostels back then. I assume there's, people also elderly. They had elder hostels at the time. Not that when I was in my 20s, I was even thinking of elder hostels, but now I do look for, the internet makes things a whole new ballgame because you can find these nice places. I first used Froma's and the printed book because you can get a lot of false information on the internet, but the printed books, at least you start there. And then I look to see if on the internet, do they agree with that person? And I look around and try to get concurrency of people agreeing about what's a good lodge, what's the good experience from a lodge, and rent a, get a guide for the day, like those bike guides. I'd look for those bike guides, here, hire a guy for a day to take us around on a bike trip with good bicycles. Because I found biking was the best way to get off the main route and go see other areas. So it's a combination of things of how I find out about this. And I read National Geographic Traveler and I look at their trips and I say, boy, they stay here, this must be good. And I can do it for a quarter of the price. Like I went to some of those lodges in the Galapagos and that place in the river, they were running a trip and they want like $10,000 a person. Well, I can still book the same thing and it could be $2,000 a person. So you don't have to go through an intermediary and you can read about it. So with them, you get an expert, quote unquote, in the history, but you can look up any history you want about anything and read it on your phone or on the internet. So that's some of the ways you can do it and really save a lot of money and get a big group of people.
Have you ever experienced a study coup or some international problem in your stay overseas?
No, actually, no. People often say, you're going here, you're going there, you're going to Africa. I've never felt, now there's certain places I wouldn't go necessarily. Like, I think going to, Kabul at the time when it was being besieged, I might stay away from there, but every place I've gone, Cairo, Egypt, I felt very safe. And when you look at safety, I walk in downtown Springfield, I take customers from the Marriott Hotel to Big Mamou's when it used to be there. I was concerned about that walk. And I've never been concerned overseas. You sit there and say, I'm right here in the US. I'm more concerned about walking down a street at night in New York than I am in almost any other city in the world. And that goes for Moscow, that goes for, whether it's Hanoi, whether it's all those places. I'm way more concerned here than I am there. Now, what's my close experience with death? In Vietnam, I've had a couple. I was walking behind everybody and there was construction going on and a window frame fell out of a high-story building and landed about 6 feet behind me. I mean, I was that close to getting creamed. And I fell off a dock in Ecuador, and almost hit I'm looking at a penguin and almost landed on some rocks, but got saved by this wooden beam. So I've had a few things like accidents per se, that my own klutziness, but well, that other one, the one in Vietnam was just bad luck. They don't have the rules about having, guarding if you're going by construction. So I'm more careful with that stuff. In Montreal, I was in a runaway horse carriage once that almost killed me when the horse stopped. So there's a few things like that, but no, I don't feel dangerous. No politics have gotten in the way, nothing like that I've had issues with. I mean, I read, I understand, I register at embassies sometimes with concerning points. I mean, and I don't always believe what the CDC says. They always say, stay here, stay there. I mean, they say don't go involved in election rallies and things like that, but most places are way safer than like walking in Washington on January 6th, there's going to be an election rally, I might not go there per se. So yeah, I've felt very safe. Even Africa, I go to Africa in the winter and everybody back and they say, are you getting sick? Everybody back here gets the flu and gets this and that. Never gotten anything. I think it just seems to be almost a healthier place to be, not associating with so many people. You're not indoors in the winter. The key is being indoors in the winter, I think, is what spreads much, and being outdoors, whether it's the Amazon or Africa, we've had any problems. That's a good question, though. Anything else? Anybody?
Great presentation.
Oh, thank you so much.
Great.
Great to have everybody here, and hopefully you'll be able to, if you ever want to go on any of those trips, you can think about those and do it while you can. That's the important thing, and I wish you the best to travel.
Sign me up.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got my email address. You can keep in touch.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks again, Rich. This was
Bye-bye.
great. Thank you.
It was great. Thank you. Bye, Gail.
Bye-bye.